All right, everybody, welcome back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Dustin William. I have my co host with me, Whitestone.
I shall now attempt to show how the most important of these principia have been crystallized into the pithy form of maxims and have influenced and developed that grand system of truth known as equity jurisprudence.
The power is neutral, it's sitting in the quintessence until you invoke it. All right, welcome everybody back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. We have made it all the way to episode 14, which I am excited about today. I am your host, Dustin William, owner and producer over at True Life Productions. You can catch all of our content over at truelifeproduction.com, including that's how you get to the second hour of the podcast you are listening to now, the Learning Out Loud podcast. The first hour is free. Go over to truelifeproduction.com, click the banner right up at the top that says the LOL podcast, and then you can click on Become a Member, and for $8 a month, you can be a member, get the second hour, get the transcript, get all of the extra goodies for the show. But that's all we got for the business today, so let's get into what we're going to talk about. Let's introduce our co-host, Whitestone. How's it going, man?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I'm looking forward to this episode. There's a lot here, so buckle up, folks.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this too. And this is gonna start a little series that we're gonna call The Fruits of Yale. This is gonna be the Fruits of Yale 1, and we're gonna start all the way back at even before Yale was started, because when I started looking into this, it seemed like there was a very interesting story at the beginning, even before Yale was started, because there was a bunch of talk about these Puritans who broke away and sailed over here and started their own got a charter for a town. They actually bought some land from some Indians. They did. It isn't stolen land. It was bought land, just for everybody out there talking crazy stuff. But what the most interesting aspect of it for me was that they actually wanted to start this colony. It was the New Haven colony, and they wanted the very foundation. They didn't want a government. Actually, it was they considered it the most one of the most radical approaches to starting a town back in the day, because they didn't want a government. They wanted their government to be the Bible, which knowing what I know about the Protestant Reformation, this is right on the heels of the Protestant Reformation and all of that stuff. So I thought it was a very interesting story. So we're actually going to go all the way back to a man named John Davenport to start this story. And so before I get yapping, you got anything you want to add to the beginning? I know you didn't get into. I actually didn't share a lot of this research with you because we're only a week. We only got a week to plan these things, so I wasn't able to share some of this research with Whitestone. But we've gone through it a little bit. You got anything you want to add before I hop in and start yapping over this chronological timeline we're going to go through here?
Well, really, I mean, what I have always thought about Ivy League schools, and this is, I think, a way to frame it for most people, is the Ivy League schools going all the way back to their original inception, and in my opinion, were basically dragnets for talent, for genetic capabilities, for intellect, and everything like that, where people are either one, recruited into the highest levels of government or intelligence or secret societies because of the abilities that they have. And it's also a funnel through which a lot of the, what do you want to call, aristocracy, where they go through and learn the true knowledge of the way that the world is actually working so that they can be a piece of the machine later on when they get out. And I mean, we see this almost openly now in a lot of Ivy League schools. There's been people that have come out. One woman, forgive me, I forgot her name, but she's the one that recommended the book called The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris.
Oh,
And
I need to get that.
it's a very, very telling book. It talks about the connections between the Vatican and the big players in World War II in Germany, and that they were almost kind of It seemed that they were arm in arm and they were giving each other the wink and the nod, but that's a separate thing. But, this woman said that she was part of a selective breeding program at an Ivy League school and did not realize it. She was getting invited to galas and, all of these other, big parties with big names. And come to find out, it was because these Ivy League schools were also centers for selecting young women to be part of the breeding programs because of their genetics. And so she came out and was talking about that. So just
Oh
as we're
shit.
going over the timeline of Yale specifically, understand that these Ivy League schools are implemented for a variety of reasons, not just higher education.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that point up because that is one of my main reasons that I wanted to jump into Yale. Yeah, it's not a coincidence. I didn't just pick a random university in America and just want to do a little research on it. There's a reason that we're digging in into Yale and starting all the way from the beginning because I we were just talking on the call before this. I really and a big reason I want to do this is because this research aligns right along the lines of a lot of my all aboard research, which is talking about the orphan trains. And I stayed away from Yale for the longest time because I thought it was like cliche. I was like, everybody's already done the research on Yale. If there was something there, somebody would have found it. And boy, was I wrong. So once
Yeah,
I
it's like
started,
everyone knows Skull and Bones and John
yeah.
Kerry and laying in a coffin and weird stuff. Okay, next.
Yeah, see that's exactly what I thought. I was like, surely if there was something there, somebody would have found it. So then I finally got over my prejudices because the founder, the one who started the orphan trains, obviously he went to Yale, Charles Loring Brace. He was a Yale graduate, and I just thought it was so cliche. I was like, surely there was something there. But luckily, I got over all of my prejudices, and finally, my research kind of hit a stop, and I was like, you know what? I guess this is where I got to look. And boy, am I glad I did because it expanded the entire universe of my research and how all of these things interconnect and what this is just it's exactly what Whitestone said. These places, um, it's not a coincidence the people that go here. And he was just I have right here, just a list of prominent people that have been here, and it's just you see all of these names, uh, even today. Um,
Yeah, Samuel
it,
Morse and Noah Webster and some of these other
yep,
people that have helped shape language and communication and everything else. And I mean, Yale's even got ties to, the East India Trading Company. So, I mean,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep. Yep, exactly, exactly. So, yeah, and yeah, just another reason, like I said, I wanted to go even before the founding of Yale because I'm like, okay, so the founding of something, there's always a context behind it. Why do these people want to do these things, especially when you're incorporating something? Because it used to be that you had to actually prove to the people who lived in the community why this was a good thing to add to the community, and that's when it got incorporated, and that's also why only corporations had to pay taxes because that's just how it worked. It was a is like a public entity when everything worked the way it was supposed to work. So, but to get back to my point, the reason I wanted to add context to the story and context I've never looked into before, and the way they were talking about the whole founding of Yale and how it is actually connected to the founding of New Haven, I was like, okay, let's look a little bit into the founding of New Haven. So you do that, and who you're going to run into, the first person you're going to run into, is this guy named John Davenport. And he was born in 1957. John Davenport was born in Coventry, Warwickshire, England, in April 1597, the fifth son of Henry Davenport, who served as a major of Coventry. He was baptized at a church of the Holy Trinity. Um, Holy Trinity Coventry. His family background embedded him in a tradition of civic and municipal governments that would later find expression in his vision for order and scripture governed community. So that's who his parents were, his little background. And then so he grows up and he is Oxford educated. Davenport entered Merton College, Oxford in 1613 and migrated to Magdalen Hall 2 years later. Both colleges had reputations as centers for Calvinist and Reformed sympathy, which are things I love to study. I would call myself a Calvinist. I know that has a very bad flavor to it these days. But if you actually look into the history of Calvinism and get rid of your Jesuit prejudices, because that is what I will call them, you will actually see that the Calvinist Reformation was a beautiful thing, and that's why we have America today, if you actually get to the roots of it. But anyways, so he left Oxford before completing his degree. Financial constraints forced the interruption, but the intellectual formation he received there grounded his subsequent ministry in rigorous Reformed theology. So, Oxford educated. Do you know anything about Oxford, Whitestone?
I know that who is it? C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, I think, met at Oxford,
Oh,
and
interesting. Huh.
I believe it was Oxford, but I know that both of them were very familiar with, like Rosicrucian philosophy, and
Mm,
they definitely have a much higher degree of learning. They're using the trivium, they're using the quadrivium, how to
absolutely.
speak, and all of that. I actually myself always had dreams of going to Oxford, but it just for the access to the knowledge.
Dude, yeah, legit.
Yeah,
That would be so
I
cool.
really just want to go to school in a nice brick building. I don't know
Right.
why.
That was built who knows when, dude. Because at Oxford University, that is considered the actual oldest university on the planet, on the plane of our existence. And it was started in like 1066 or something, like 1031 or something like that. I mean, literally 1,000 years ago, if you believe the timeline that
Yeah.
we're on right now. And so, yeah, and it's very interesting that they went along with the Calvinist Reformation, because they actually had a lot of Jesuit influence. So, yeah, it's a very interesting place, and what I'm sure we'll actually end up doing shows on that. But yeah, that's where Davenport was educated. So obviously, this dude got a high degree of education.
I want to
So
also add real
go
quick
ahead.
that this time, 1615, 1619, like the early 1600s, was right around the time that the American colony started to kick off. And so
Yes.
you've got people coming over to the quote unquote New World, and they institute the very first dragnet, place of higher learning, kind of right around
Hmm.
that time, because the first charter was 1605, and that was the Virginia Charter. So this is right around the time about the birth of this country. And if you think
Yep.
about the impact that Ivy League schools have on shaping, the intellectual uh, environment and atmosphere of a society, it would make sense that in the new world, they're going to put one of these major institutions in first.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, I do believe Yale is the second oldest university. Did you know Harvard's the oldest university in America?
Yeah, I did know that.
Yeah, it started in 16, some right around this time too, actually. And we'll actually we'll find out later that the big reason they started Yale is because Harvard was breaking away from their Calvinist ideologies. So so we'll move on with Davenport's timeline here a little bit. And from 1615 to 1619, he was the chaplain at a place called Highland Hilton Castle in County Durham. And so before completing his Oxford degree, Davenport accepted uh, a living as chaplain at Hilton Castle in County Durham. This gave him his first sustained pastoral experience outside the academy and placed him in a position of personal ministry before he had formally credentialated himself. It was during this period that his Puritan conviction began to solidify in practice rather than in theory. So this is where he's first getting his theological roots. Obviously educated at Oxford first, and then plucked right out of Oxford to the County Durham. So 1619 to 1624, he was a curate at St. Lawrence Jewry in London. So by 1619, which London we both know is a very interesting place in itself. Uh, but
Yeah, the
so by
Queen was not allowed there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the most interesting aspects. Is that it's the Queen needed permission to go to the city of London. So, but so by 1619, Davenport was serving as curate at the St. Lawrence Jewry in the city of London, beginning his integration into the interconnected world of London's Reformed clergy and their lay patrons. These relationships with merchants, lawyers, and aristocratic Puritan sympathizers, would sustain his ministry for the next 2 decades. He served at St. Lawrence Jewry until his election to the vicarship of St. Stephen's, Coleman Street in 1624. So it was just moving up in the ladder, obviously at the City of London. Where else are you going to move up in the ladder? So Davenport was appointed Vicar of St. Stephen's, Coleman Street, 1624, a position obtained through his influence through prominent Puritan patrons, including Sir Edward Conway and Sir Henry Vere. To secure the appointment against ecclesiastical objections, he submitted a declaration of conformity to the Church of England canons. A declaration he soon outgrew. St. Stephen's became one of the central nodes of London's Puritanism. Its parish networks extended to Amsterdam and eventually to the colonies, and Davenport's decade there made him one of the most visible Reformed ministers in the city. And then so this is we get
So,
to
wait, are you
go ahead.
saying that they were actively trying to implement and or revive Protestant Reformation sort of thinking in the institutions in London in 1625, 24?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, yes, that
Oh,
was the
that's
whole thing.
interesting.
Yeah. Davenport was a strict Calvinist. He was a very big Calvinist, and right around this time, Calvinism was hot because the Protestant Reformation was it really kicked off in the 1540s, was and then was really high all the way up until like almost 1600. And this is like the fruits of Calvin's labor here. And yeah, Davenport was very much a Calvinist. So that takes us to 1625, and apparently there was a plague in London, and I didn't even know about this plague. Did you know there was a plague in London in 1625?
I did not, but 1625 reduces to 77. So I mean,
Of
it's
course it does, yeah.
I mean, you know how
So
it is. There's a plague that comes in, it wipes things out. Nobody knows whose property is who, and it's just you know one of
yeah, we
those.
didn't just live through that at all, did we?
No, absolutely.
So, yeah. So yeah, it seems like the more things change, the more things stay the same. But this is apparently where Davenport kind of set himself aside. So set himself apart from the other ministers because London suffered a devastating outbreak of plague in 1625. While many clergymen fled the city, Davenport remained at St. Stephen's to minister to his congregation, earning significant public gratitude. In the same year, he returned to Oxford to complete his deferred degree, successfully disputing for and receiving a Bachelor of Divinity from Magdalen Hall. The combination of pastoral courage during the plague and renewed academic credentials reinforced his standing in London's Reformed community. So this is where he really starts making a name for himself. So, and then moving on to 1626. In 1626, Davenport became one of the, what is that a fiefy? Fiefs?
Fee off.
Fioff. Okay. And I actually didn't get a chance to, do you know what a fioff is? I didn't get a chance to look
So
that up.
So if you look in Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England and they get into property, if somebody's got a property in fee simple, if there's like a fee offment, and it's all these landlord-tenant relationships, and
Yeah, okay,
there's a
that's
little bit of trust and equity kind of going on in there about divvying up the ownership. I'm not exactly, I didn't get a chance to look into that, but I do know that the framers of the Constitution, when they created it, we all know that the Constitution is a genius mortgage trust that was created. They
mhm.
did a, they took a lot of the um, what do you want to call it, like landlord tenant relationships,
Yeah.
mortgages, vested interests, and things like that from Blackstone, but they got rid of a lot of the old language, like the fee osments and fee simples and stuff like that, because that was a lot of feudal type language. So they did away with a lot of it.
Okay, that's kind of yeah, that's what I thought it was. Yeah, because he was a fioff for impropriations. So yeah, I figured it had something to do with that, but I wasn't exactly clear. So okay,
It's
that
a
makes a
body of Puritan clergy and laity who pooled funds to purchase. Um, what is that?
oh okay right.
Impropriate.
Impropriate Inappropriate church livings. Impropriate. I actually don't know the definition of that one either, but I'm assuming that's like a if he was a thief, then he's probably appropriating the funds. He's almost like a
Yeah, well, it
fiduciary.
seems like what they're doing is they're siphoning off any money that comes in from their presence there and feeding it right back into the growth of their church.
Which could be because this is where the Catholic Church starts getting
Yeah.
involved.
That's
But
weird because
he's
that's what they're doing now. So
yeah, but he's actually ends with the at odds with the Catholic Church. So, but income rights over so yeah, so in 1626, Davenport became one of the fiefs for impropriations, a body of Puritan clergy and laity who pooled funds to purchase impropriates appropriate church livings, income rights over parishes. Okay. So he was like he was the fiduciary, right? So he was like a trustee almost, and redirected them to ministers and reformed sympathies. The scheme was a sympathetic attempt to build a Puritan presence across English parishes without direct confrontation with the Episcopal hierarchy. Archbishop Laud later suppressed the fiefs entirely, regarding the project as precisely what it was, a covert mechanism for planting non-conformist clergy across the national church. So yeah, it's exactly what that was. And he was trying to spread Calvinist views, and then we all know what an archbishop is. That is somebody who has power in the Catholic Church. So obviously, the Catholic Church came in and shut it right on down.
I've got
Um,
the definition of fiatment real quick if anybody wants
okay,
it.
yeah,
Uh,
let's hear that.
Fiatment is used in conveyancing. It's a gift of any corporeal hereditament to another. It also
Mm,
signifies the instrument or deed by which such hereditament is conveyed. The instrument was used as one of the earliest modes of conveyance of the common law. It signified originally the grant of a feud or fee, but it became in time to signify the grant of a free inheritance in fee, respect being had to the perpetuity of the estate granted rather than to the feudal tenure. So there's a lot of feudal language in there.
yeah, huh?
Um,
Interesting. That's actually way more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, okay. Huh, so he was like he must have been yeah, he must have been very probably good with the law, I would imagine, going to
I
Oxford
think they
and
would
stuff.
have to be because if they're being granted a feud, which basically means there's already a feudal system in place, and these members of the clergy were granted that feud, and now they're running it. And I'm assuming that under feudal law, they're making money off of it and then just funneling it back into their plans. It's like, hey, go take over this feudal society for me. I've got like 400 peasants and a couple sad cows or whatever. Just milk them for whatever you can and build this church, please.
Well, I mean, yeah, they were definitely it seemed that was exactly what the scheme was. So yeah, and then the Catholic Church came and shut that thing down. So by 1629, Davenport had moved beyond private sympathy and openly aligned himself with the Puritan movement. He contributed 50 whatever the currency was, 50 of whatever the currency was to the Massachusetts Bay Company, and joined other ministers in an attempt to persuade Thomas Hooker and John Cotton, those are two other ministers, to remain in England rather than immigrate. The effort failed. Hooker and Cotton chose exile, and in doing so, they reportedly convinced Davenport that he could not himself remain in the Church of England without irreparable compromise to his conviction. So after their whole thing gets shut down, obviously, in my opinion, I don't actually have a source for this, but in my opinion, what would be happening here is the Catholic Church got wind of all of this, and then so they shut their whole scheme down, and then these two other clergy they were planning on since they couldn't hold to their convictions where they were in the Church of England, they were planning on leaving the town. Davenport uh, took it upon himself to try and get them to stay, but in that situation, he actually became convinced to leave. And so that is what caused him to originally leave London and the Church of England. which brings us to 1633. So William Laud, which is Archbishop Laud, was elevated to Archbishop of Canterbury in August of 1633. The same month, Davenport vanished from his parish. He evaded the five agents dispatched to apprehend him and escaped to the Netherlands. First to Haarlem and then to Amsterdam, his fight marked the definitive rupture with the Church of England after nearly a decade of conscious nonconformity. He had been the vicar of one of London's most prominent Reformed parishes. He left it with a warrant behind him and no settled destination ahead. So he fled due to this scheme that he was planning. So and he's in the Netherlands, so that takes us to 1633 to 1637. In Amsterdam, Davenport responded to an invitation to assist English Reformed Church as a co-pastor under John Paget. The partnership collapsed over the question of baptism. Davenport held that the sacrament should be administered only to children of full professed church members. Those who had, so basically him and this guy, him and the John Paget guy, they fell out over their opinions over baptism, but this conflict was not merely tactical. It crystallized the sacramental theology he would carry to New Haven, and that would drive his later opposition to what is known as the halfway covenant, which is that's a big theological argument we don't really need to get into now. But basically, the whole reason he left Amsterdam was because of a disagreement over baptism. So, which is what brings him to America. So Davenport sailed for after this situation. Davenport sailed for New England with his congregation and his lifelong friend, the merchant Theophilus. Theophilus Eaton, arriving in Boston in June of 1637. Massachusetts Bay was convulsed by the antinomian controversy surrounding Anne Hutchinson, which is another thing we don't have to get into. But Anne Hutchinson is she's a very interesting character. She's like a very early feminist. I think some of the feminist ideology comes from her. But she was challenging covenant theology. Is basically what she was doing there. So Davenport lodged with John Cotton and worked to mediate the crisis. He participated in the synod convened to define religious errors and distinguish himself by making an extended, ultimately unsuccessful effort to bring Hutchinson to the orthodox position before her church trial rather than simply condemning her. And I do believe they burned her at the stake, actually, for her theology.
Oh, well, that's surprising.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, she was pretty crazy though, back then. I've looked into Anne Hutchinson a while ago. And she was quite the character back then.
She reminds me of that lady on the Quest for the Holy Grail, Monty Python, where they're like, "A witch, a witch," and they're
You know what? That's probably based off her, honestly.
yeah, where
Mm. Um, all right. So, and this is where we start to get into the old meat and potatoes of why we're here. That's all Davenport's background and why and how he actually got to New Haven. So, 16th in April of 1638 is when they actually co-founded the New Haven colony at Quinnipiac. So dissatisfied with Massachusetts Bay's government and theological direction, Davenport and Eaton. Oh wait, actually, you know what? I just took a few notes on this Eaton guy real quick because I did think it was interesting. So there's an entry on Encyclopedia Britannica or Britannica.com if you want to read more about him. I just took a few notes out of here. He was one of the members that we read. He along with Davenport, he actually started the Massachusetts Bay Company, and he claimed to be a Puritan. He doesn't claim to have gotten his theology from Davenport, but they were lifelong friends growing up. So I'm only assuming that's where he quote unquote got his Puritan theology. Um, so, and these beliefs were apparently pure enough for him to come with Davenport over to New England and during this whole controversy. And so, I'm assuming why Davenport and Eaton became so close during this time is because Eaton probably had a some funds to help with the Massachusetts Bay Colony because Theophilus Theophilus at his core was a merchant. That's what he was, and he started the Massachusetts Bay Company, and he was the original commissioner of the New England Confederation, which I'm pretty sure is a military unit. So I'm pretty sure he was behind funding a lot of the origin of the New Haven colony. But that's all we really need to get into
Well,
on
and
him. He
according to
just,
your notes, Theophilus and well, I think it was Davenport, wrote the legal codes, and then
oh yeah,
uh,
yeah, yep, you're right. Yeah, you're
Theophilus was
absolutely
the
right.
first governor of New Haven, and we know that when we start talking about codes, we're talking about the other side of the law.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, yeah. They were credited with writing the legal codes for New Haven, and yeah, the Eaton was the first governor of New Haven. So yeah, yeah. What does that tell you about? So, would you know? Maybe I guess those people are necessary when founding a new colony and breaking away from the Church of England and all that stuff. So, who knows? But it did seem like a very interesting character for Mr. Davenport to link up with. So and the colony was founded with a royal charter, and they bought the land off of its legal basis was a land purchase from the Quinnipiac people, which is they were a quote unquote Native American. Which Native American, we're going to get into that whole term later. Later off in a later episode, that's a whole misnomer too. But it was an Indian tribe that they bought them off of. So and its civil government was to be derived entirely from scripture. Eaton was elected governor. Davenport became the colony's pastor. Davenport designed the town's plan around 9 squares, a layout intended to reflect his understanding of the Israelite encampment in the wilderness, the Temple of Solomon, and the New Jerusalem described in Revelation 21. And I totally forgot about that part, actually.
Wow. You know,
Yeah,
it's interesting that the 9 squares um, is a very interesting thing because if you look at old phones, like I still have a flip phone. I don't care what people think. But the numbers 1 through 9 are laid out in a 9 square orientation. And it's the same with that game Sudoku, where you have 9 squares
yeah,
and you've got to,
yeah.
fill in all the numbers and everything else.
It's a great game,
So
actually. I
there's
love
definitely
Sudoku.
something going on there with the structure, with the relationship between numbers and everything else.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I totally because I knew about the whole 9 square grid thing a long time ago when I did research back in the day, and I totally forgot about that. The Temple of Solomon and the New Jerusalem described in Revelation 21. I haven't gotten a chance to read that in a
Well,
while actually, but what's that? Oh, you're muted. Yep.
when we were talking right before this, I was going over US.
Oh, you're muted again. Uh-oh.
Oh, sorry about that.
You're
Um,
good.
Basically, what I was saying is that before we came on the show, um, it says it was established into 9 codes. Well, 15 USC subsection 261, the title being zones for standard time, interstate or foreign commerce. It basically says that the territory of the United States shall be divided into 9 zones in the manner provided. And they've got basically it's coordinated universal time and it's to coordinate all interstate and foreign commerce. So there we have something being broken up into 9 different zones.
Yeah, yep, that's yeah, can't get away from it. Yeah.
Can't get away from
Nine,
it.
yeah, nine has a
Absolutely. And I also wanted to make a comment on one of your notes here
yeah.
where the the legal basis was a land purchase from the Quinnipiac people. In Joseph Story's commentaries on the Constitution of the United States, he outlines the fact that the Pope at the time had, they were trying to figure out why it was or how to take the land from the Native Americans, and they realized they couldn't do it. So what they said is, look, all that land that you're inhabiting, that's ours, but we're going to let you live here, and gave them a beneficial interest in the land. And
Hmm.
so whenever we see, a purchase from the Native American people, it's likely because they transferred or gave up their beneficial interest in the land that was granted to them by the Pope, who said, hey, look, yeah, you've been here for a long time, but this land was granted to us. So we're just going to give you a beneficial interest and we'll let you live here. And that's what they did, is they probably ended up selling it to whoever it is was that was interested in buying it.
Well, yeah, and it even says it was founded, or oh no, it says it founded without a royal charter. Um, so it wasn't from the king. So yeah, that probably does have there's probably a lot of weight to what you're saying there because as we know, the what is it, the 1783 definitive treaty of peace, that's basically where they lay out that the King of England is still the or is it the church or England is the they're basically the trustee of the land. Am I thinking of that right? Is that the right treaty?
Yeah, it was the Treaty of Peace where, it was a
Yeah.
three-way treaty between, the King of England, a representative for the Holy Roman Empire, his name escapes me, and three
Hmm.
representatives. I think it was John Jay, Benjamin Franklin, and I
Adams,
don't remember
maybe?
who the third one was. But yeah, basically it was, the church was saying, "Hey, you two, you're having a fight over here on my land. You guys need to figure it out, because one of you is the
Hmm.
trustee, one of you is the beneficiary. You guys need to knock it off."
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know,
Yeah.
and
And
make
people get
nice.
really mad at that document, but it's just because they're not reading it with equity eyes.
Yeah,
Because
big mad, whatever.
yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, you really just got to change your perspective on it because I mean, that's what gave us the Constitution right there, and that's why it is such a fundamental mortgage document.
Yeah,
Trust,
and that
trust
really, yeah,
fund.
that relationship where, England's like, "Hey, this is it's our land. Okay, fine, you have a beneficial interest. So, hey, guess what? That is, it's a trust. There's a bit of a mortgage going on there.
Hmm.
So, and that's the thing is that, trust law is something that absolutely cannot be trespassed upon. So they had to allow it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's why we study what we study. It's because of that right there. Yeah, so all right, so we'll start moving on into the fundamental agreement on the New Haven colony. So on June 4th, 1639, the Free Planters of New Haven, that's what this group of people was called, was the Free Planters of New Haven, assembled and adopted the fundamental agreement. The colony's foundational constitutional document it established that only church members, those judged credibly elect, could vote or hold civil office. Scripture alone would govern public affairs. Jury trials were excluded as unbiblical. The agreement is among the most rigorous theocratic documents produced in 17th century English America and the clearest textual expression of Davenport's governing vision. And it is a pretty interesting document. I did end up pulling it. This is you can find this on evelyn.law.edu. This is from Yale's law school, and this is the original Constitution of the Colony of New Haven. Um, so I did want to read just a little bit in here. I don't want to read the whole thing verbatim into the record, but um, I'm going to read these first couple paragraphs because I do find them very interesting. So the fourth day of the fourth month, which 44, look at that. Which is, yeah, this is 1639. So June was the fourth month, not the sixth month. Uh, so the fourth day on the fourth month, called June 1639, all the free planters assembled together in a general meeting to consult about settling the civil government according to God and the nomination of persons that might be founded by consent of all, fittest in all respects for the foundation work of a church, which was intended to be gathered in Quinnipiac. After solemn invocation of the name of God and prayer for the presence and help of His Spirit and grace in those weighty businesses, they were reminded of the business whereabout they met, for the establishment of such civil order as might be most pleasing unto God, and for the choosing of the finest men in the foundation work of the church to be gathered for the better enabling them to discern the mind of God and to agree accordingly concerning the establishment of civil order. Mr. John Davenport propounded divers queries to them publicly, praying them to consider seriously in the presence and fear of God, the weight of the business they met about, and not to be rash or slight in governing their votes to things they understood not, but to digest fully and thoroughly what should be propounded to them, and without respect to men, as they should be satisfied and persuaded in their own minds to give their answers in such sort as they would be willing should stand upon record for posterity. So this is them writing their constitution, and that's their whole purpose behind it. And I did just want to get into query one here. Um, so query one, whether the scriptures do hold, and they are basically holding a vote on this. This is what they're asking. So they're asking the crowd whether the scriptures do hold forth a perfect rule for the direction and government of all men in all duties which they are to perform to God and men, as well in families and commonwealth, as in all matters of church. This was assented unto by all, no man dissenting, as was expressed by holding up of hands. Afterwards, it was read over to them that they might see in what words their vote was expressed. They again expressed their consent by holding up their hands, no man dissenting. So basically, that is them officially putting it on the record that they are going to be governed by the Bible and the Word of God with no man dissenting in the entire town. And they even put emphasis on kind of on the weight of what they're doing here in this first paragraph. And, we talk about it all the time. I'm sure all of these things were started as tools of manipulation, but what a cool idea. If I was going to start a town, that's how I would start it too. The Bible would be my government. So I think it's pretty cool. You got anything to add to that, Whitestone?
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you're using the Bible as a basis for your government, what you're insinuating is that equity and grace are going to rule the day, and anything else is going to
Hmm.
come second.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's so much law in the Bible. I don't think you need anything else. As we're gonna talk about here, and it might be next week. I don't know exactly. Me and Whitestone got to talk it over, but I do want I because we didn't get to talk about it in last week's episode with rhetoric. The all of the rhetoric in the book of Job and how it's all connected to the law. But we could make a whole hour out of that. So we're gonna do a whole show on that. But my whole point being is that there is so much law throughout the actually. Matter of factly, that's where we get all of our laws. That's what they based our Constitution on. That's what they based all of our laws off of. Was specifically the not the Geneva Bible, but it was a different interpretation of it. This is a 1611 AV Reformation authorized version Bible, but that is where we get our government and our code. So basically, I would say this is kind of where it started. The idea started was here in the founding of New Haven, and then it's just been grown and grown. And if you get into it, you understand that the writers of the Constitution were Calvinist also. So this is really just an all-encompassing thing and just a very interesting story that I thought was pretty important to bring to the fold. So, do you got anything you want to add to that before we move on?
No, let's keep rolling.
Okay, cool. So that gets us to the founding of New Haven. And so that's in 1639. Obviously, Yale isn't founded for another few decades. Actually, 1701 is when they get their first charter. But another reason why I did want to go into this story is because the founding of Yale, obviously, is going to be connected directly with the founding of New Haven. So that's where we're going to get into a very interesting man by the name of James Pierpont. And this guy, we're probably going to end up talking about him a lot because his family is very prevalent. His family is not only connected directly to the first Great Awakening, religious Great Awakening, which was around the 1740s, because one of his daughters, one of James Pierpont's daughters, married a guy named Jonathan Edwards, who was um, uh, he was basically the central figure of the first Great Awakening in America. So, and then we will also, as we get later in this series, we will also come to find out that Yale is actually directly connected with the Second Great Awakening, religious awakening in America. So there's going to be a whole lot of interconnecting crazy timelines here. And another thing, just to add on to the pile here, this is even further down the line, but James Pierpont is a direct descendant to somebody you guys may have heard of, J.P. Morgan. He is that's like his fifth great grandfather. So J.P. Morgan is just connected with everything in this country. He basically purchased it during the Civil War, and his ancestors basically founded um, Yale and New Haven.
Oh,
So
that's so random. Wow.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's all random, and it's just a big coincidence, and none of this was planned at all. So
Yeah.
yeah, take your tinfoil hat off, you fucking conspiracy theorists. So, but yeah, so we get to the founding of New Haven. So now let's get to the founding of Yale, and we're probably going to kick it into high gear here because we don't have much more time. So, but the birth of John Pierpont. So John Pierpont is James Pierpont's father. James Pierpont was born in 1659, January 4th in, I think, yeah, Roxbury, Massachusetts. And he was one of five children. His baptism is recorded in Roxbury church records a few days after his birth, which is a great. I just wanted to touch on that because that's how all records used to be done, was through a church, a Bible, or things like that. You never used to have to tell the government anything. So, anyways, moving on from that, he will grow up in the heart of New England's Puritan intellectual world, attending to the premier schools and college of the colony, and became one of the most influential Congregationalist ministers of his generation. So, and he is educated at a place named Roxbury Latin School. So we're just going to make a very short pit stop here because this place is very interesting because this place is accredited with being the longest running educational a place of education in America. So we're not going to get too far into this, but I do think it's very interesting because, so right here, 1645, the Roxbury Latin School is founded by a guy named John Eliot. The Roxbury Latin School was founded in 1645 during the reign of King Charles by Reverend John Eliot, minister of the First Church of Roxbury, and later renowned as the Apostle of the Indians. Well, that's interesting. The school was initially called Roxbury Free School. Okay, so yeah, that's not important. But basically, what this place was meant to do, it was basically a Harvard prep school. Okay, it's founded in 1645, and the whole purpose behind it was to get um, people ready for Harvard. And as we get further in this journey, we will come to find out, like, you know what West Point is, right? Whitestone?
Yep. Yep.
Yep. That was actually founded as a prep school for Yale. So these are basically funnels for it's basically, I mean, the way I almost see it, because like in Freemason, you have these rituals and initiations, right? And that's how you move up in the ranks. It's almost like these schools are initiations and rituals. And like you go to a certain school and you can get access to certain people and certain things in life. I don't know if you see it the same way, but that's kind of
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a
yeah.
knowledge base, it's networks. In these prep schools, they're grammar schools. And if we think back to our trivium episode, you've got the three stage of learning,
Yeah.
or you first start with grammar, and then you go into logic, and then you go into rhetoric. And the schooling follows that too, because first you have grammar school, and then the next step up is you really start to get into the nitty gritty and the logic and how pieces fit together.
Hmm.
And then you go out into the world and you use that and you use your rhetoric for whatever position you've been assigned.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said that because it was even called a grammar school, English grammar school. That's what it was. So that's where he's starting off. And then so yeah, right here by the 1660s, within roughly 2 decades of its founding, Roxbury Latin had established itself as one of Harvard College's leading preparatory institutions. Its classical curriculum centered on Latin, grammar, and rhetoric directly matched Harvard's entrance requirements, and a generation of Roxbury boys who passed through the school went on to Harvard and thence into the ministry, law, and colonial governance. So basically, a lot of the founders of this place we're at now probably went through Roxbury Latin School. And like I said, this is the longest running educational foundation in America. So,
And it's
six,
interesting that they went into it for ministry, for law, and for governance. And one thing that my version of the trivium had laid out was that the trivium learning or method of learning was used at those levels to be able to guide and organize society using logic and rhetoric and grammar. So
oh
really,
yeah,
again, it's just highlighting the fact that these schools are prepping the elite for governance
yes,
or
yep,
to govern.
absolutely, yeah, to govern, yep, to govern. Yeah, so yeah, I mean it's just and yeah, all the way from the beginning before this country was even founded. So that gets us back to Pierpont though, Mr. James Pierpont the first. So yeah, he was 1670s, educated at Roxbury. So he graduates Yale in 1681. James Pierpont graduates from Harvard College in 1681 with a focus on liberal arts. Harvard is at this time the sole institution of higher education in the colonies and the exclusive training ground for New England's Congregationalist clergy. Pierpont's Harvard cohort will supply nearly all of the men who 2 decades later co-founded the Collegiate School of Connecticut. His Harvard diploma makes him both a member of and a future critic of the institution. His concern about Harvard's theological drift was a primary motive for founding an alternative college in Connecticut. And the theological drift was obviously they were drifting away from Calvinism. So he wanted to start Yale College. Um yeah, and yeah, so yeah, just like we were uh, Pierpont's Harvard cohort will supply nearly all of the men who 2 decades later co-founded the collegiate school. So, um, almost all of the men who founded Yale were educated at Harvard. So he in 1684 he arrives in New Haven, Connecticut, following his Harvard graduation and period of preparation. James Pierpont arrives in New Haven, Connecticut in 1684. He comes to a town already deeply shaped by Congregationalist theology. New Haven was co-founded in 1638 by Reverend John Davenport and merchant Theophilus Eaton as a Bible-based settlement and separate from the Massachusetts colony. Pierpont arrives during a ministerial vacancy at the first church that persisted since the death of its predecessor, Reverend Nicholas Street in 1674. So there was a 10-year gap between ministers before he got there, and so he automatically so he just basically filled the spot there. So he's ordained minister. And then, so this is going to get us to the connection with the founding of New Haven. So James Pierpont marries Abigail Davenport on October 27th, 1691 in New Haven. Abigail is the daughter of John Davenport Jr. and the granddaughter of Reverend John Davenport, the founding minister of the New Haven colony. The marriage is thus a direct link between Pierpont and the founding Puritan line in New Haven itself. The union but unfortunately, so that gets him in with the family, but unfortunately, she actually died shortly. I mean, I think it was yeah, I think it's 3 months after they got married. So that's unfortunate, but that does, I mean, he was obviously, you don't marry someone without knowing their family. So he's obviously in good with these people and, in good enough to, and, marriage was a big deal back then. You had to get, and permission from the father. You actually legitimately had to ask permission from the father. And most of marriage back then was really, even in the 1690s, I would still say that it was mostly about property acquisition, especially in these higher echelons. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think it really had anything to do with this notion called love. Um,
No.
I mean, marriage has, and I think always has been, created for the establishment of families, the either the transfer or the maintenance of wealth and connections, and basically just to keep the engine of life running. to produce children. It really didn't have anything, or it didn't have as much to do with, what people are calling love today. It was it was more transactional back then. It really was.
Yeah, yeah, I would believe that. That's really why, because even though they were only married for like 3 months because she unfortunately caught a cold and died, I just want to bolster the point that that is still a significant connection, because that these families were very interconnected. And as we go on, he he chose his wives very wisely. So James Pierpont in 1694 marries Sarah Hayes on May 3rd, 1694 at Hartford. Hartford, Connecticut, another place we'll talk about a lot. So Sarah, the daughter of Reverend Joseph Haynes, and Sarah Lord Haynes. So the Lord family, they're another huge family in the Skull and Bones and in Hartford and New Haven, Connecticut. And they're, I mean, especially when you get to like the 1840s and 1850s, the Lord family, they're huge, and they basically run the whole law community in New York around that time. So this is a really significant connection right there too. But I think she ended up actually the produce one child. Yeah, so they had one child before Sarah's unfortunate death too. Um, but then he does have another marriage, and he marries Mary Hooker on July 26, 1698, in New Haven. Mary is the daughter of Reverend Samuel Hooker, a granddaughter of Reverend Thomas Hooker, the chief founder of the colony of Connecticut. So not only is he connected with just the founding of New Haven, but actually now he's directly connected with the founding of Connecticut itself. This is the most dynastically significant of the Pierpont three marriages. It unites two of the most consequential Puritan clergy bloodlines in New England, the Pierponts of New Haven and the Hookers of Hartford. The marriage produces the children who carry the Pierpont name into the 18th century, most notably Sarah Pierpont, which we touched on a little bit earlier, who was married to Jonathan Edwards, who started the First Great Awakening. And I will also, or no, so yeah, the Hooker family, who was the guy? Do you know the guy in the Civil War? Uh, there was a, there was a Civil War general that was also a Hooker, who I'm pretty sure is directly connected to this line of Hartford Hookers.
Well, they would absolutely have to be, because I think what you're seeing is the concentration of power and wealth and the building up of a network between law and ministry and commerce and governance. And
That's
that's really
yeah,
what these marriages are about, is tying the families in together, tying in the social obligations, tying in all of the wealth, and basically creating a network where, they can have control based on, who in the family is holding what positions in society, whether it's, like I said, law or banking or business or, the clergy. They've pretty much got their hands in all of it through marriage.
yeah, yeah, and we're not even close to even talking about Skull and Bones yet, because they weren't even founded until 1832. That's over 100 years after this. But as we will see once we get into that, we're gonna see all of the same names: Lord, Hooker, Pierpont's gonna be there. Pretty sure there's a couple of Haynes in the Skull and Bones fraternity, and and I haven't made the connection yet, but with this next little point, according to Yale's own institutional tradition, James Pierpont led a group of 10 congregational ministers at the parsonage of Reverend Samuel Russell. And I haven't actually made the connection here, but as we were just talking, I can only assume that Reverend Samuel Russell is a descendant of uh oh what's his name? William Russell? I think he's the founder of Skull and Bones. Is the
Well,
Russell
there's
family.
also, isn't that a chocolate company as well?
Probably. Yeah, I would
I,
imagine.
I think
Yeah.
there's the Russell Corporation or something that's got something to do with chocolate. And then, you've also got the famous seer called Walter Russell, who wrote the Universal One.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
you just follow those names, Haynes. Um, everybody knows that they're, big into, the linen, their textiles, um, underwear, socks, I guess you could call it. So
Yeah.
I mean, they've got their hands in everything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and yeah, that actually brings us to a great point to wrap this episode Up because this is basically how the actual oh oops, that is not what I meant to push. Before Elihu Yale came in and actually gave his namesake to the institution. Um, so that's Connecticut. So basically, these 10 people here: Samuel Andrews, Thomas Buckingham, Israel Chauncey, Samuel Mather, James Noyes, James Pierpont the First, Abraham Pearson, which is where Abraham Pearson. That's where the first student actually stayed. They actually started the college in his house, and then so Nodiah Russell. There's another Russell, Joseph Webb. The Webb family is huge in this whole story. These 10 guys right here, they actually originally donated the books for the founding uh, of the actual school, and this is circa 1700,
I
1701.
would love to get my hands on those books that were donated.
Oh man, what? Yeah, I wonder. You know
Can
what?
you
That's a great
imagine?
point. I'm gonna see if on Yale's website if if they have a list of the books actually, because I just found a really good resource. Actually, before we move on to the second hour, let me just show this to everybody, and I will uh and then we can move on. But I just wanted to show this to everybody. This is from Yale.edu. I actually just found this. This is an actual chronological timeline. It goes through date by date by date, decade by decade by decade, every important event that happened in at Yale University. So this is a very, very valuable resource. I actually haven't gotten to dig into this too much because like I said, I just found it. But man, there's some great stuff here. And one of the best things is here you see that date right there, Whitestone.
November 11th, 1701, the trustees met in Saybrook and voted to locate the school there with Reverend Mr. Abraham Pearson as rector.
So uh that's when they're putting the pin on the founding of
Oh,
Yale.
look at the one right beneath it. Jacob Hemingway, born in East Haven in 1683, was received at the rector's house in Killingworth, now Clinton, Connecticut, becoming the first student at the new collegiate school. It's interesting, Killingworth and Clinton are synonymous.
Really?
Well, that's what it's, I mean, now Clinton, I guess the name that was Killingworth, they're
Oh
saying now
yeah.
Clinton. So it's
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah.
are they saying that when you see the word Clinton, you should also see the word Killingworth?
Oh, I don't know. I think maybe they just changed the name of the town. But you know what? It's interesting that you say that because Clinton, that is such it becomes a very, very prominent name that does actually cover up a lot of names later in New York City. Like they actually changed the where the orphan train started from they changed it from the Astor Theater to Clinton Hall. So it seems like Clinton is a name to cover up shit, and it seems like it's kind of a signal for stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
mean, I
interesting you
don't
bring
know.
that up.
Back then, did they have hashtag Clinton body count in
Right.
1702?
They might that we might be
Well,
able to start adding
it's
buildings to it
Killingworth.
too.
I mean,
Yeah.
Killingworth, body count, Clinton. I'm just saying, like the last 300 years, there seems to be a tie there.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, that I think that's a great place for us to leave it off there. That gets us right up to the founding of Yale in 1701, November 11th, 1701, to be very, very specific, 11/11, 1701. So yeah, that I think that's a perfect place to leave it off, and hopefully we will see everybody over at the second hour of the Learning Out Loud podcast. You can find that over on TrueLifeProductions.com. True Life Production, sorry, singular, no S on the end of that, TrueLifeProduction.com. Click the Learning Out Loud podcast banner up at the top. Click on the button that says become a member. And for $8 a month, you can get all of the extra content, a whole extra hour of us yapping and all of the documents, show notes, transcripts, all of that stuff. I'm even going to put it up. If you like to use the Obsidian app, I'm actually going to compress all of these to zip files and drop them in there for you so you can build this little neural network that we're working on right here and see it for yourself how all of these things connect. This is all the stuff we've talked about before. And this is all the stuff we're talking about today. Davenport, all the good stuff, Yale, all that stuff. So if you want this stuff for yourself, all you got to do is go to truelifeproduction.com, become a member, and you can have it all for yourself. That's going to wrap it up for us. So never forget to seek truth and honor the Creator above all, and let that be the whole of the law.
That's the important thing here, is that everyone's word should be meant for a use.
And the words that I'm using today are meant to pull down idols within people's temples.
Meaning that I want to destroy
Falsities that they have idolized.
for their entire life.
And just pull those out and sweep them clean. And before that temple,
And get reinfested with a new lie. Give it true life.